Hello and welcome back to the Pharmaverse Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, well, then you found the right podcast because we interview the brightest stars from all the corners of the pharma universe. The show is powered by K. Bassman International, the leader in pharma and biotech recruiting. And we're also sponsored by Executive Biotech Advisors, a trusted consulting resource in the biotech industry. We're joined today by Christiane Langer, MD, the SVP of Clinical and Medical Affairs at SECURA BIO. Christiane is going to be discussing personal branding, what it means to be an authentic leader, and what it means to wear your heart on your sleeve. So let's get started. Christiane Langer, welcome to the Pharmaverse. So Christiane Langer, welcome to the Pharmaverse.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I know I've been after you for a while to be on the show, and I just think you're so special and that you have so much great advice to share, but also I just really respect how authentic you are and your social media presence and that sort of thing. So that's sort of where I wanted to start. You know, anyone who follows you on any social media platform knows you're an authentic leader, but that's sort of becoming like a buzzword. So I thought maybe you could define what an authentic leader means to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good and very timely question. It is indeed a buzzword, and it's also becoming a real bad rap, I think, or it's very misunderstood these days, I feel. And that is because it's mistaken as, either really oversharing or radical transparency, or being, just being real. I'm the real me, take it or leave it. Or the other end of the spectrum, it's like, a kind of a brand, of leadership, a certain brand of leadership that somebody is trying to create. So real like acting, and that it looks, it looks sincere, but it really feels very scripted. And when that happens, I think that has the opposite effect, and it breaks trust, and it gives people who are feeling like they are authentic leaders this bad reputation. It leads to, this year we've seen several publications about the Harvard Business Review, for example, about authenticity and about leaders maybe going back to bringing less of themselves to work. And some of what they say is true because of the reasons I just mentioned. But in its true form, and what authenticity means to me, of course, it's authenticity, being genuine, I think is a great leadership quality to have. It is based on integrity, really aligning the values that I have with my words and my actions. It's being present, so fully with you, listening, being clear, being empathetic, being courageous to really express hard truth and to also make yourself vulnerable.
I think that is the key word that was in my mind while you were answering, because in order to be our real selves, really in a lot of different settings, it takes courage.
Absolutely. Yes.
And not only do you, I know you, so I can say this, not only do you wear your heart on your sleeve, but you wear your sleeve on your sleeve. So yeah, there it is, right? So
all the way up. Yep.
All the way up. Yeah. And so how do people in a corporate setting react to the arm sleeve?
Yeah. It's interesting. So just really briefly, the story behind it. I have multiple little tattoos, that I collected over the years, but really the sleeve started during COVID, I would say. And it was during a time of personal, lots of personal changes. Actually went through separation and divorce. I had some health issues, and that coincided with COVID and the time after COVID, where we're still in, just in Zoom land at work, all the time. And I had little tattoos that represent sort of what I like. I like Maui, I like knitting, but it turned into like this whole sleeve of, basically the tropical vibe. And I think for me, it was during that time of over 2 years or so, it was a way of dealing with my, what I was going through, but also expressing myself. And, a reminder for me what happiness is to me, those things that are on my arm. I look at them and I'm like, that does mean happiness, and it brings me happiness. But during that time when we were still in Zoom meetings, in the beginning, I was actually being very careful of hiding it, so I wouldn't be sitting here like this right now. I would turn it so that, it cuts off here. I'd also pay attention that I wasn't doing any arm movements, that all of a sudden you would see the tattoo. That all changed when we went back to having face-to-face meetings. And actually we had a big face-to-face meeting with the whole company, or a big part of the company. And I was giving a presentation about why the company is different, what I think is different. And so I talked about the company, all those things. But in the end, I also talked about how leaders can be different these days, and that I'm a different kind of leader that, other leaders, no one is the same. But that I am here not for, what I look like, but that I'm here for what I bring in experience and skills and knowledge. And then when I took my jacket off, basically I had a work dress on, but it was, it was really sleeveless. And so I showed that full sleeve that no one had ever seen before. And so the reaction was actually really overwhelmingly positive. And I wasn't sure before. But people came to me and showed me their tattoos and said that it was so inspiring to hear that and to see that. And that if basically a senior executive, senior leader could have that and could show that in the corporate environment, then, that really tells us how the corporate environment also is changing. And so overall, I get a lot of, really positive reactions. I get messages on LinkedIn because it was important to me to take pictures, professional pictures, and that's my profile picture. So I get positive reactions, and it's a conversation starter for sure.
Well, I mean, you're obviously comfortable in your own skin, and I think that's part of authenticity. And I think it does also set a culture within a team that, hey, you should be comfortable in your own skin too. And I think all of us have had sort of a crash course in that, being inclusive and all these other things. But whenever you do sort of show what being in your own skin is, sometimes you're going to get negative responses. I got to think you've gotten some of those, huh?
Yeah, but although really not that often. I walk into a boardroom now without even thinking about it. I'm in a new company and went to the first board meeting, and it was in the summer, and I walked in there with the dress with just straps, and I don't even think about it. But then I realize as I look around, I get a little bit of looks. I mean, people usually don't say anything, and I think it's a little bit more the surprise. I don't feel judgment very often. It's more a little bit of the surprise, and then people, get over it, especially if we start talking about work and, the work I'm doing and the success that I'm having. I do sometimes have colleagues who are still a little bit stuck in where I was years ago. And so I feel from them a little bit, they are a little bit judgmental, and they themselves are still trying to just be very careful and hiding it, but always make sure the sleeves are long enough and they're wearing jackets at work, because it's just a little bit of a different perception they still have.
Well, I appreciate you being so forthright talking about it. I was almost hesitant to bring it up, but I'm glad I did. And, when we think about the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because I think you really have done a nice job of personal branding. I've noticed that the LinkedIn pictures are just more thoughtful about your personal brand. You post often. You post about private things, your family and so on. So I wanted to dive into that and think about how much forethought is going into your personal brand, or is it just something that comes naturally to you?
Yeah, thanks. For me, it's a mix, I would say. To some degree, it comes natural, and that makes it easier, right? It's just like leadership skill. I mean, sometimes it's natural and that's easy because some things are just hard to learn. So with the brand, sort of personal brand, I think comes natural. I like social media. I do post on the more private social media and Instagram and all that. And on LinkedIn, I think it was important. I mean, it's important to me to talk about topics that are, really true to me. Yeah. So again, we go back to the authenticity. And as you said, I talk about personal things, yet in a professional way, of course. I think things that I'm passionate about, that are important topics that I can speak to from from the heart. That's what it almost really it shows up for me, and I feel like, oh, I think I want to talk about this, and make a post. And that was a recent example when I just in November, visited Germany, and my parents, my hometown, and my dad has had severe Alzheimer's and has been in a home for almost 5 years. And that visit was particularly memorable. And I mean, I thought about that a lot. And of course, I talk with family and friends, but I also thought I would like to think it through and express what I'm feeling and share that, with other people. And so I posted that on LinkedIn. And so it is natural. And then at the same time, I do think about it in other ways, right? I mean, that was something that came natural and I wanted to post that. Other times I look at LinkedIn every day. Other times I look at it and I think, oh, it's been a while that I've posted. Would be good because you do want the momentum, you do want to keep that going. However, I don't like to post just to post. I also don't particularly like when, companies often want us to share, when there's company news or posts. Yeah. I mean, I will do that, of course, because I'm a team player and I know it's important for the companies, but I can just tell the response that I get is very different when I'm resharing something, or if I'm even posting something that was written for me. People can tell it is a very different reaction, and the posts with the highest impression and likes and all this are those ones that we just talked about that are real important to me. They come from their heart. They really, they show what I think and how I feel, and you can hear me speaking in them.
I've had the exact same experience. There's been things that I've shared that have been corporate. I've got a few likes and comments and stuff.
Yeah.
When I shared something about my family or my children or something that was a big struggle, people resonate with it, and it starts going like gangbusters.
Yes.
Here's a question. And you mentioned more private social media versus public social media. So there is a borderline. There's a boundary between the person and the personal brand. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, where is that cutoff for you? And I'm sure it's a moving target for everyone.
I mean, I differentiate between the posts that I would make on the personal, Facebook or Instagram platforms versus LinkedIn. Actually, I've also had my experiences over the years mixing work and those personal accounts, right? I mean, having been in this industry for over 20 years, I mean, I've had issues with, when you're friends with people you work with, or you post something and then, I mean, people see where you are and all this. So I've learned, I'm very kind of careful. I try not to mix, for example, current, work colleagues with my private social media accounts, or I'm more cognizant on what I post there. On the professional social media, I do want to show who I am as a person. But yeah, it has to be either work, I would keep it either work related, or, as I said, something that is personal, but it has a message that relates somehow to work, the environment that we work in, whether, the Alzheimer's also has to do with drug development. I am very grateful for the people who develop drugs for Alzheimer's, even though I've always been in oncology drug development. But that, so it relates to the professional environment, but in a way where I can infuse my personal life and a little bit of my personal opinions, or just my, also lessons learned to it.
Yeah. And you brought up your dad a couple of times. I wanted to get to that because I remember when you posted that, really touching. And even the angle of the picture that you posted was really kind of artistic, and it was touching, really touching. And, I'm father of 3 girls, so I hope they love me like that when the roles are reversed. And, so what is some advice that you can glean from your thinking back to your relationship with your dad? Was there any leadership advice that he gave you?
Yeah, I mean, could talk long about my dad. Of course, it was It was, he was a very dominant person in my life. I only have one brother. I'm the older one. And so a lot of the focus was on me, and a lot of the ambitions and the hopes and, everything was put on me. But I also learned so much from him. I mean, I really respected, his work ethic, how he worked his way up to where he wanted to be. And then my parents wanting to make it easier for us kids to have a better education, a better life. But most what I learned from him was really, to kind of have dream big and go for it. Really don't restrict yourself, because he showed that too. Like, he came from nothing and he did secondary and tertiary sort of educations in evening schools. So he instilled that in me, that, I can do anything I want to do, and I should go for that. And I've shared that with my kids. I actually was very passionate when my daughter, when she's 5 years old, told me that I couldn't be a doctor because I'm a woman, right? She said, you're a nurse. And I said, no, I'm a doctor. And why are you saying this? You can be anything you want. So it's that's what I learned from my dad. Of course, I share that with my kids. I just want them to do what they love, but also to never think that there's anything that they cannot try or do.
That's a beautiful sentiment. There was a picture that you posted, seems recently, and I spent a lot of time looking at this picture. It was your dad was there, and you were standing on a rock. Mm-hmm. You know that picture?
Yes.
And I was looking at like every little bit of it, and I'm like trying to think, like putting myself in that situation, like maybe he just got home from work and he was waiting all day to play with his daughter, and his daughter was waiting to play, talk with him and just spend some time, or maybe it was a long lunch break or something. And it's just really touching to see how much your dad has had an influence in your life. He must be so proud of you.
Yeah. Well, he was. I know he was, and I hope he is. But with the Alzheimer's, that's the question. That's what really made me post that. It's the whole. It's so sad that we just don't even know, right, what he's thinking. But yes, I like to think that in that moment, also where that picture was taken, I like to think that it was a moment where he recognized me. That's how it felt. And I definitely like to think that he's proud of me and what I've accomplished.
I don't see how he couldn't have thought that. I'm just making a connection here. You were talking about why the tattoos are important to you. It's sort of like posting a picture of this is where I was at this time. And it's sort of like a picture album that you wear and take with you everywhere. Yes. Is there something cathartic about posting some of these pictures?
Yeah, I think so. You're right. Yes, absolutely. It does. It does feel like that. Mm-hmm.
Well, you said something earlier that I wanted to sort of pull the string on it. You said some people feel like the way you personally brand is oversharing. What advice would you give to other leaders who are like trying to establish a personal brand and maybe like feeling awkward doing it? Any advice for them?
I've definitely gotten comments over the years of people who have different opinions, right? That they feel like oversharing or as we talked about, vulnerability. I mean, I was in a meeting where I was sharing how I was being vulnerable with my team, and these other women, it was a women's leadership circle, were saying they were shocked, right? One woman said, one female colleague said, I would never make myself this vulnerable and show the team that, and to me, it was like, no, that makes me human. I mean, that was also a special situation, but that makes me human. And that, I trust them that, and I know that, so this builds more, it wasn't something that I did to achieve certain things, but this is how I feel. And I know I wanted to share that with the team. I thought about it, but it was really interesting and a little shocking to me how I got that reaction from another also female colleague. But to share with people who want to establish a brand, I think it's to just really think what makes you tick. What are you passionate about, and what are those things that you can then start to express? Because as we said before, it has to really be sincere and come from the heart, and it'll resonate with people, and people will look through everything, and people will know this is the real you speaking. And so everybody needs to know for themselves and maybe do a little bit self-work who they are and what is important to them, and then go with that. And that is what ultimately will be your brand.
Yeah, that's great advice. One of the things that I think about when I'm posting on LinkedIn, because I get that same feeling if I haven't posted in a while, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I irrelevant? Or, am I losing all this momentum? And when I think about what am I going to post next, because I don't want to post just to post either, is what's going to bring value? What can I do that at least bring value? And sometimes sharing something personal is valuable. But when you think about posting, what type of value are you trying to bring to a greater audience?
I do try to post experiences, lessons that I'm learning. Just things that are important to me. Other posts that I can remember is women's month or something. So I've had so many talks that I give to other women in the company, and I love talking with younger female leaders and sharing my experiences, and sharing experience that challenges I faced as a female leader, as a mother, right? The struggle between being, the mom, but also the working one, and the, being torn, and the guilt. And so sharing all of this, also sharing that in posts, or what I just said, like the lessons, how my kids react to me working or being the breadwinner, and when they finally actually can express that they value that, and after all the hard times, when they say that I'm a role model for my daughter, for example, or so those things are really, really important to me to share.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let us be a fly on the wall a little bit with some of these conversations you're having with other female leaders out there. What's some of the advice that you share with them?
So first of all, I really say find your tribe. Kind of it's always amazing when I meet with other women, whether it's in an organized or not organized way, and I'm part of many women's leadership initiatives. There is actually often this default trust. You're in a room of women, and we might be in different industries, really different jobs and functions and ages and times in our lives. And it doesn't always have to be, there's with kids, without kids. The problems or the issues are very often the same. And then when you talk about kids and work, then definitely. And so there's this immediate trust and really open sharing. And so find groups like that, find other people that you can talk to, because we're not alone. I mean, this actually happens to everybody. And so when I talk, when I give talks, especially when I talk to younger, to younger colleagues in the company, who sometimes come to me and actually talk to me and ask, like, how did you become, who you are today? I mean, I have a 1-year-old. I don't know how to do it all, to do the work. And, I really want to be like you one day. And I'm amazed though by, for example, that colleague that I'm thinking of right now. I was amazed by how smart she was, because she presented earlier what she had accomplished already in her young career. And so I said all this back to her, and I also said to her, look, there are different times in your life. You can't be doing everything at the same time. So, and actually I regret a little bit that I didn't have more time with my kids when they were younger. I went back to work after 2 months. I never had extended periods of time until last year where I spent times with the kids, because I was always working. And so that's probably the one regret I have in my life, that I wish I had more of that. So that is a big one that I will tell women, or men too, right? But take that time. I mean, work will be there. Yes, we want to have a career, but the career is going to be decades long. And so if you take it a little bit slower and prioritize your family a little bit more right now, it's not going to go away. There are times for everything. And so I think those are very important messages that I like to tell people, because they put so much pressure on them, and then they see where you are. And hearing from somebody who in their eyes has reached what they want to be is very encouraging, because they say, I had no idea that you would go through the same things, that you had those issues, that you that you are struggling, and all that. So and that is very gratifying to see. I mean, I love hearing that helps others, and that helps, them with their future career too.
That you made me have a memory. I remember when my oldest was born, I work a 100% commission job. And so I went back to work on day 8. I got a week off. And I remember crying the whole way back to work. And I'm saying, I'm missing an eighth of her life. Today I'm missing an eighth of her life. And it's a struggle. What a challenge, not only for female leaders, but for male leaders as well. Before I lose my thought, I want to go back to something you said earlier about, no, I'm a medical doctor, not a nurse.
Which, by the way, of course, nurse is a totally, really great profession, and not that one is better than the other. It was just the fact that, a girl immediately would think you cannot be the doctor as a girl, as a woman. You are the nurse, and the man is the doctor, sort of, right? But of course, both very great professions. But yes.
They're great professions, and some of the nurses I have in my life are like angels. But what made you want to be a medical doctor? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was always interested in science all throughout school. I mean, those were the subjects, related to science that I was most interested in and good at. And also, I'm a people person, always have been. And so not only do I thrive from people interactions and connections, but also helping people. And that was even when I was younger. And then combining the interest for science and helping people, helping patients. I think that's what ultimately got me to become a doctor. It had a little bit of its challenges because my parents wanted me to study medicine. And as a rebellious, teenager at the end of high school, I did not want to do that at all. So at first, I took a gap year and I took a little bit of a detour, but then worked in an old people's home, helping people where there was a lot of medical issues, and I was seeing what the doctors that came in were doing. And that actually made me turn around and think like, look, just because I don't want to do, I want to be rebellious and all this, that's not a good reason. I mean, I love this. I love helping people. I love, really making them feel better through the science. And so I decided to take the exams for medical school, and well, the rest is history for me.
That's right. Well, do you remember the first time when someone put you in a leadership position, even before industry?
I want to say I remember a leadership position even before medical school. I did track really competitively all through my childhood. I started with 6 years old, and then I ended with 17 when I had peaked, and it wasn't getting any better. And that was, in a team. I mean, a team that was together for many, many years. It's a little different in Germany than here, where sometimes you're only with people together for a short time. And so I actually ended up being a little bit of the natural leader of that girls team in that age group for years.
Well, what was your event?
Oh, my track event. So I'm a sprinter. So my best, my best disciplines were 100 meter, 200 meters, also long jump. So we did relays, and I did heptathlon. And so we went to German junior championships. I was, in the northern region of Germany, 100 meter, 200 meter champion in that. So
incredible. I think sports and competition and stuff also contributes to leadership and work ethic and all those things. And but I want to also mention, because you're talking about Germany and your career started outside of the U.S. and then you came to the U.S., what is the biggest leadership difference between leading a European team and a U.S. team?
Leadership difference. So, culturally, there's a lot of differences between Europe, Germany, and then here. So now I've spent, I want to say, almost half of my life here, but I did all my, childhood and education and even working in the hospital in Germany. But I also had the opportunities, after having leadership opportunities here, to go back to Europe, actually to Paris once with BMS, and then to Germany with Roche, into leadership roles there for, expat assignments. And so those were amazing opportunities, but they also highlighted, especially the one in Germany, highlighted that is really quite different culturally, and the culture in a corporate environment was very different. It was much more regimented, by the book. This is how we do it. Also as a leader, this is how you are. And this brings us back to authenticity. They were not used to a leader like me as very untypical German, right? I came in as this sunshiny, optimistic Californian, but speaking to them in German and saying, hello, here I am, and let's try things a different way. And let me tell you, and I show pictures, let me tell you, this is who I am, this is my family, this is, what I like doing outside of work, but also here is, what I expect from you, this is what you can expect from me. I remember the team was 50 people, it was the hemato-oncology team in Germany, and they looked at me like, I was like the bunny that the magician pulled out of the hat or something. I mean, they were just like, what's going on here? And so I know that they were not used to that type of leadership at all. It was very kind of more formal, strict. You don't really question it too much and all that. So it was an adjustment for all of us. I mean, I couldn't just be myself and just have them all, change. We all had to adapt a little bit. But by being consistent, again, and my values and my actions and my words aligned, and they were consistent, right? Really repeatedly talking about what's important to me, that really won them over. And after a while, that was probably the most loyal team I ever had in my career.
Wow, cool. I like to ask this question to all the guests because when you become a leader or a manager, you're always going to make these rookie mistakes that managers make because there's not a lot of management training. That's part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast. So if you could go back and give advice to yourself as you're entering into your first leadership job, first management job, what advice would you give to yourself?
As I'm thinking about as a manager specifically, I think I made some mistakes. And I learned, and I think the one that sticks in my mind the most is because I'm so people oriented, and I like, I want my team, I want my people to feel, the belonging, to feel included, and I like to have fun at work. I talk about that. We spend so much time, we're the work family, and so we work hard, but we do want to make it fun most of the time. Can't make it fun every day. I got a little bit close in the beginning to some of my, when you have direct reports, probably too close, became like really friends that then resulted in, imploded into basically an HR situation that I did not see coming at all. And actually when my manager at the time, who was the opposite, he wasn't like friendly with anybody, not friends, but not friendly. And he was saying, see, you should never, that's what you get. I still don't agree with what he was saying, but I learned from that. And of course you can be friendly. It's very important to me. I'm always friendly, sort of professional friends, but there's a difference. And when you're working with somebody, especially in a direct reporting relationship, that's a very fine line. It's very hard to keep it that way. And so that is something that I learned relatively early on, and that I since then, I'm just much more aware of it, and I'm very careful on how I handle that. And I also don't need to be the last one when everybody goes out and you're out in the evening. And I used to be like there with everyone until the end, and that was fine. But that has changed a little bit, and that was intentional.
Yeah, professional distance. Yeah, I learned that in coaching too. When I was a young coach, before I got into recruiting, I was a baseball coach. And I wasn't much different in age than the players. And, you can get too close to them, and then it affects your ability to lead or to manage them, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Good point. Great point. What advice do you give to someone that's sort of trying to position themselves to move into a leadership role?
Yeah. First, I would say maybe I'm the manager, but I'd also say get a mentor. Find somebody else other than your manager who, who's maybe another successful manager that you see, or successful leader, and just ask for it. Ask for mentorship. So find a mentor. Also think about who are role models for you. And again, this happened to me from a coach when I had the first time coaching. I was asked, like, what is a female role model for you in this industry? Can you think? And I couldn't think of anybody. That was actually very memorable, because I could think of who I didn't want to be like. And I later, I had other role models, but in that moment, all I could think of, like, no, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be like that. But what I would tell people is, find mentors, find role models. Maybe they will become a mentor. And also, don't be shy to ask, because I see that a lot of people feel like, oh no, especially if it's a more senior person, I can't go and take their time. I can't even go and ask, to talk to them, nor ask them to, like, spend their time, maybe on a regular basis. And I have done that through my career, that I put myself on calendar of, the CEO or the head of the department when I was just, on the more junior side. And I never had a no from anyone, nor would I say no. If somebody asked me, it won't be tomorrow, maybe. It won't even be, depending on how busy that person is and how big. But I know that no one has ever said no to me, and use that to introduce yourself and to ask for advice too on your career. Just describe on what's important to you, where you want to go, and see what these more senior people have to say to you.
That's great perspective and great advice. And I don't know if you could believe it, but we're already out of time for today's episode. Went so fast. I could speak to you for hours, but I know that I speak for everyone in the audience when I say thank you. Christiane Langer is a great person to follow on LinkedIn, as we've been talking about throughout this whole program. But thanks for sharing your words of wisdom for us. We've all benefited. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so much fun.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Pharmaverse Podcast. We have many more great leaders lined up for you, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single career-enhancing insight. But as for this episode, that's a wrap. See you next time on the Pharmaverse. Thanks for joining us on the Pharmaverse Podcast. Make sure you subscribe below so you don't miss any leadership insights. Like and comment. I would love to hear from you. We'll see you on the next episode of Pharmaverse.